All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon session. We are presenting on amendments today. Throughout this week, we have several sessions helping folks with ESSER resources on the ESSER grants. Today, we are focusing on amendments in e-grants. Tomorrow, we will present some sessions on cash requests, and we have those sessions at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. as well. So thank you for being here. My name is Rebecca Brown. I am the ESSER program manager. My contact information is on the screen here. If you ever have questions while you are working through the ESSER grants, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call, and my contact information is here, and I'll also put it up on the slide at the end of this presentation as well. So this presentation, I've got a few goals that I want to address with you folks. This is focusing on amendments, and I kind of wanted to take just a holistic view of amendments. How do I create amendments? We have an amendment template that we suggest that you use, so I will share that as well. And then things like the feedback or history on previous amendments, as well as a good timeline to follow as you are working through amendments. And then, like I said, we will have question and answer at the end here. If you have a question at any point, please feel free to post a question in the chat, but like I said, we'll have open question and answer at the end. When you are going through the process of an amendment, there are 5 steps, and I will give more details on these 5 steps here in the next few slides, but in general, you're going to first create an amendment, then you will unlock the pages, update the pages of the grant, write an amendment description, summarizing what you did in the amendment, and then finally submitting the amendment. So these 5 steps, first one is you need to create a new amendment. You will log into eGrants, and depending, if I know we have some superintendents or some clerks who actually serve multiple schools, so you'll want to make sure that you log into the correct school that you're trying to make an amendment for in eGrants. And then once you get into the eGrants Access Select menu, where you can see all of your grants from that fiscal year, you'll want to select the correct fiscal year. And I've got on the slide here, our ESSER grants are in 2 different fiscal years. So ESSER 1, which would be the ESSER Fund Grant and the ESSER Related Services Grant, those are both in fiscal year 2020. And then ESSER 2 and 3 and the ARP Summer and ARP After School grants, those are in fiscal year 2021. So you need to make sure you're in the correct fiscal year. And then next to the grant that you're trying to amend, you will click on the amend button, which is circled in the screenshot here on your screen. Then after you create the amendment, you'll need to go into the amendment and unlock all of the pages in your application. If you don't unlock the pages, then you won't be able to save any changes that you've made. So in order to unlock the pages, you will go to the Page Lock Control tab up at the top of the screen in the application, and you can see that this is pointed out in the screenshot by the big yellow arrow. And then once you're in Page Lock Control, you will click on Expand All so that you can see a list of all of the pages in your grant, and then you'll click Select All to select all of those pages and unlock them. And then super important, you need to make sure you click Save at the bottom of your page. If you don't click Save, then the changes don't save, the pages stay locked. So you got to make sure you hit that Save button. Then step 3, after you have unlocked the pages, is then you can go in and start making changes. And in an amendment, 99% of the time you are making changes in your budget pages. So how do you find those pages? It depends on the grant that you are working in. So on this slide, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, those grants are consolidated grants and they have multiple budget pages. And so in order to find those budget pages, you'll go up to this drop-down menu that's at the top right of the application screen. And when you click on the drop-down menu, you can see all of those different budget pages. So that's for ESSER 2 and 3, but for ESSER 1 and the ARP Summer and ARP After School grants, they only have one budget page, so there's no drop-down menu. It is just a tab in with all the blue tabs at the top of the application screen. So you'll click on the Budget Pages tab. And then once you're in those budget pages, then you can make the changes. You may be changing object codes, you may be changing the use of funds, the description of the expenditures, the dollar amounts, but that's where you're going to make most of your changes. And then after you've made all of your changes in your amendment, pro tip here, you will probably want to write down the changes that you're making, record them somehow in an Excel spreadsheet or on a sticky note. But let's say you're moving $1,000 from object code 100 into object code 600. You will want to write that down, because the next step in creating an amendment is describing in the amendment description all of the changes that you made. So in order to do this, you'll click on the amendment description tab up at the top of the application, and then you'll see this text box in the amendment description tab. And I've got a screenshot of the text box down at the bottom of your screen right now, and I have highlighted you have a maximum of 500 characters to describe exactly what you changed in this amendment. And once you start typing, 500 characters goes very quickly. So we, in working with schools over a few months, we developed a kind of boilerplate or a template that you are recommended to use in order to keep this amendment description really short and sweet. So that template, that boilerplate, is right here. This template has specific information that you are going to want to put into your amendment description. You're going to want to put how much money is being moved out of a category. So let's say my example, you're moving $1,000 out of category 100. You would write from 100 / $1,000. And then where is it going? So you'll say to category 600 / $1,000. You'll say how much money is going into that category. And then the next part, for the purpose of or to purchase whatever it is that amendment was changing the budget to purchase. So for example, let's say this purchase was for a Chromebook. You moved $1,000 from 100 into 600 in order to purchase Chromebooks for students. So that would be what the purpose is. And then these last check marks here are how it relates to the grant. How does it relate to preparing, preventing, or responding to COVID or the effects of COVID? And specifically, how does it relate to student gains? How do your students benefit from the changes that were made in this amendment? So in my example of the $1,000 worth of Chromebooks, Chromebooks can be purchased so that there is one Chromebook for each student, one-to-one device usage. Students aren't sharing devices, therefore you're limiting the spread of infection. And if a student has a school-assigned Chromebook, then if the student if there's a COVID-related isolation or school closure, then the student has access to remote learning as well. So there's a couple ways that expenditure could relate to prepare, prevent, or respond to COVID. And then down at the bottom of your screen, you see in different colors here, this is the same template, but it's laid out in a different way with colors. And this is what I generally will email. If I'm emailing you the template to use, I separate it out using these colors. I'm a really visual person, and so I like to visually be able to see the 4 different parts of the amendment template. That just helps me make sense of it all in my head. Those colors don't, they're not hyperlinks. They don't mean that they will autofill. That is just to help separate the different parts of the amendment. So over on the right-hand side of your slide, notice that cash requests are going to need to use the same language as your budget and your amendment description, so make sure that you're consistent. If you were to make an amendment to move $1,000 for Chromebooks, like in my example, and then you submitted a cash request that had nothing to do with that, with what's in your budget, or you submitted a cash request that didn't include the language of how that expenditure relates to preparing, preventing, responding to COVID, or benefiting the students, that inconsistency doesn't create a very good audit trail. If your grant were ever to be looked at by an auditor, they're going to want to see a very clear audit trail and connection in between your budget language, your amendment language, and your cash request language. So we really recommend you use the same language for your budgets, cash requests, and amendments. And here we've got a good example of what an amendment description looks like. So you can see in this example, $10,000 was moved out of 100, $2,000 was moved out of 200, and then that total $12,000 was moved into 600 for the purpose of purchasing laptops, responding to the need for online learning, preventing further loss of learning and attendance due to COVID-19. So you can see all four parts of that amendment template in here. And then here, I've had lots of questions working over the last few months. I'm not moving money out of just one category. I'm moving money out of several categories. Well, if that's true, just use the word and. I've got it bold and underlined here. You can say I'm moving this much out of this category and this much out of this category. So you can just essentially use the same pieces, but duplicate them there. All right. And then after you have finished your amendment description, then the last step is to submit the amendment. So you'll go to the submit tab, which is at the top of your application. You will need to run a consistency check where eGrants goes through and makes sure that there aren't any inconsistencies. It'll make sure that the budget numbers total up correctly and things like that. If there are any issues, you will see a red error message up at the top of the screen that says this can't be submitted because of whichever issues eGrants found. And then after the consistency check is run successfully, then you will hit submit. Now, if you are an authorized representative for your school, when you hit submit, it'll go directly to OPI. It'll come straight to us. If you are not the authorized representative, like let's say you're a district clerk, then when you hit submit, it'll go to your authorized representative, and the authorized representative can submit it to OPI. And when in that example, if the clerk submitted it to the AR, then eGrants will show that it is submitted for local review. So it's still within your school system. And then to see where your amendment is at, like let's say you created an amendment, you submitted it, and you don't know what the status is. If you go back to the eGrants Access Select page, there is a column that says status, and you can see the status of your amendment. There's 5 different status messages that you could see. One is not submitted, so that means you haven't submitted it yet. Submitted for local review means that it has been submitted to the authorized representative, and the authorized rep needs to send it to OPI. The third one is submitted to OPI, which means it's in our bucket and we are in the process of reviewing it. Final approved means that OPI has approved it and returned it back to you so that now you can act on those changes you made in the amendment. And then finally, the last message is returned for changes. So that means OPI looked at it, we reviewed it, but there were changes that you needed to make. Either there was something that was confusing, or the budget numbers didn't add up, or things like that. And when we do return it to you, we leave feedback on how to fix it. And I'll show you how to access that feedback here in just a minute. In order to view previous and current amendments, so let's say you're a brand new clerk, you just got into your position, you want to know what happened already with this grant so that you know the best way to move forward. In that eGrants Access Select page where you can see all of your grants, there is a box next to each grant that says the revision cycle that it's on, and this is a drop-down menu. And in this drop-down menu, you can see in this screenshot here, it will show all of the different amendments, including the original application that was submitted. So let's say you're going through your amendment and you're trying to write your amendment description and you can't remember what you changed. Like let's say you were making budget changes over the course of a week and you didn't write everything down. Ah, man, well, you can look back at the previous amendment and figure out what was in that budget and then compare it to the current budget that you've amended. And that can give you an idea of how much money was moved around or how the descriptions changed. So that could be helpful to you as well. But you'll click on in the dropdown which amendment you want to look at, and then you just have to click open in the blue button over to the right of that dropdown box. And then you can also view the history within an amendment. So let's say this amendment has gone back and forth between your school and OPI a couple times, and you want to figure out how many times it's gone back and forth. When you're in that eGrants Access Select page, click on the amendment you want to look at, but then instead of clicking open, you can click on the blue button that says review summary. And that will open up this other menu here that shows the different steps of the process that this amendment has gone through. You can see that it was completed by, in this screenshot, you can say it was completed by the LEA data entry person, which then submitted it to the LEA authorized representative, who then submitted it to OPI, and I am the one who reviewed it. And then at the bottom of this screenshot, you can see right now there's two buttons. If this amendment has gone back and forth a couple of times, there will be a third button that says show previous rounds, and you can see every time the amendment got sent back and forth. So that's how you see history within the grants. And then I told you, you can see the feedback from OPI when we send a grant back to you, an amendment back to you for changes. In order to find that feedback, you'll still be in that review summary page from the last slide. You'll select the circle next to where it says SEA review, and then you'll click on the blue button that says review checklist. When you do this, eGrants is going to open a second tab in your browser. This will only work if your pop-up blocker is turned off. And this is a really frequent issue that we get phone calls about. I can't see the feedback in my amendment. Well, make sure that your pop-up blocker is turned off, because if your pop-up blocker is on, it will block eGrants from opening the review page, and all you will see is the grant itself. And that's not helpful because you can't see the feedback. So after your pop-up blocker is turned off and eGrants opens up this second tab, that tab has the review checklist with all of our comments in it. This third screenshot on your screen right now, this is a screenshot of one of these text boxes in the review checklist, and you can see this text box has feedback on Amendment 1, Amendment 2, and Amendment 3. These amendments were all good, they were all approvable, so all we said was okay and our initials. I do put my initials after every one of my amendment reviews so that you can anchor on who it was that returned your amendment. And if you have questions, I would be the person to contact there. But if there are issues that need to be fixed, like let's say something was confusing or you needed to rephrase or whatever the feedback was, that will be in this text box here. All right, so that's how you see the feedback on your amendments. And then this is just kind of a general timeline of how amendments work. Our sincere desire is to have a quick turnaround on these amendments. We want to get these back to you as quickly as possible. And if it's easy to fully understand what happened in the amendment, like if you use the amendment template, the approval will be much smoother. It'll be much quicker. Using the template makes it a lot simpler for us to understand what happened, and it makes it simpler for us to approve. But if we can't understand, like if there's confusion or if we need clarification, most likely we're going to send that amendment back to you and it'll say returned for changes so that you can update it and then resubmit it. And again, how to see that feedback was on the last slide. And then after your amendment gets approved, then you can start making cash requests based on the items that are within that amendment. Cash requests need to be submitted by the 25th of each month in order to be paid by the 10th of the next month. So right now we're coming up on September 25th, which is a Sunday. But if you get a cash request submitted today or any day before the 25th, that cash request will be processed by our grant accountants and will be paid out on the 10th of next month, which is October. If you miss the deadline of the 25th, you're not in trouble. But it won't be able to be processed until the next month. So let's say you miss the deadline of September 25th and you submit a cash request on September 27th. Darn it, the next time that that would be processed and paid out to you would be on November 10th, which would be the next month's payout. So hopefully that makes sense. We do have a session on cash requests tomorrow. If you have any questions or want some clarification there, we welcome you to join that session on cash requests. All right, but there's a general timeline for the amendments. And then I've also gotten a question a couple times, how do I delete an amendment? Sometimes you make a mistake. You created an amendment on accident. You wanted to hit the open button and you misclicked and hit the amend button and you created a brand new amendment you didn't want. How do I get rid of it? Or sometimes you start an amendment and you start making changes and then you go back, you revisit it, you talk with your school board or with your clerk or with your superintendent and you decide, you know what, actually, we don't want those changes. What you need to remember is that only amendments that are in progress that have not been submitted to OPI can be deleted. After you submit it to OPI, you can't delete it anymore. But if you do want to delete an amendment, you just need to make sure the correct amendment is selected in the drop-down box. And then there's a button all the way over on the right-hand side that says delete application. And this button, like in this screenshot, it's grayed out because that amendment has already been submitted. So if it's grayed out, you will not be able to delete that amendment. All right. Our website, opi.mt.gov, has tons of resources. When you go to that website, there is a big blue ESSER button over on the right-hand side. And that ESSER website has lots and lots and lots of information for you. Wendy and I we are reviewing that website and trying to update it so it's a little bit easier to find that information because there is so much in there. We do want to make it a little bit easier to navigate, and hopefully those website updates will be coming out here beginning of October. But all of that information is available at opi.mt.gov, and then you can click the ESSER button over on the right-hand side. That is the end of the information that I wanted to present. At this point, I'm going to stop the recording and open it up for general question and answer.